Hezbollah leader to weigh in on Hamas-Israel war. Top U.S. diplomat arrives in Israel, SBS News. Hezbollah leader to weigh in on Hamas-Israel war. Top U.S. diplomat arrives in Israel. Hezbollah leader Saeed Hassan Nasrallah's speech will be scrutinized for clues on how the group's role in Hamas-Israel war might evolve. Lebanon's Hezbollah leader Saeed Hassan Nasrallah speaking during a televised speech in February 2022. He will weigh in on the Israel-Hamas war on Friday. Source: Getty, Xinhua News Agency. Hezbollah leader Saeed Hassan Nasrallah will make his first public comments since the Palestinian militant group Hamas and Israel went to war, a speech that will be scrutinized for clues on how the group's role in the conflict might evolve. A formidable military force, Hezbollah has been engaging Israeli forces along the border, where 55 of its fighters have been killed in the deadliest escalation since it fought a war with Israel in 2006. On the eve of his Friday speech, Hezbollah mounted what appeared to be its biggest attack yet in more than 3 weeks of fighting, saying it launched 19 simultaneous strikes on Israeli army positions and using explosive drones for the first time. Israel responded with air strikes along with tank and artillery fire as the fighting on the border escalated. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a brief history. Friends or foes? Where Israel's Middle Eastern neighbors stand on its war against Hamas. As war rages in Gaza, why is the West Bank in its deadliest week of violence? Relief and fear. Evacuated Australians speak after Gaza border crossing breakthrough. Many people in Lebanon are anxiously awaiting the 3 p.m. midnight Saturday AEDT speech, rattled for weeks by fear of a catastrophic conflict. Some say they are not making plans beyond Friday, believing his remarks will signal the chances of escalation. The speech is also being anticipated more widely. Nasrallah is a leading voice in a regional military alliance established by Iran to counter the United States and Israel. Wearing the black turban of a Sayyid, or a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, and Shiite clerical robes, Nasrallah is one of the most prominent figures in the Arab world. Recognized even by critics as a skilled orator, his speeches have long been followed closely by friend and foe alike. He is deemed a terrorist by adversaries including the US. His fiery speeches during the 2006 war elevated his profile, including one in which he announced Hezbollah had struck an Israeli naval vessel with an anti-ship missile, urging viewers to look to the sea. Hezbollah is a Lebanese Islamist political party and militant group formed in 1982 after Israeli forces invaded southern Lebanon that year. It is backed by Iran and leads a multi-party alliance that holds just under half the seats in Lebanon's parliament. Hezbollah is listed as a terrorist organization by countries including Australia, the US, Germany, and the United Kingdom. The European Union lists only its military wing as a terrorist organization. Top US diplomat arrives in Israel. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived in Tel Aviv on Friday to push for humanitarian pauses in the Gaza war after Israel said its troops had surrounded the Palestinian enclave's biggest city, the focus of its drive to wipe out Hamas. Israeli forces again pounded the Gaza Strip from ground, sea and air throughout the night amid global alarm over horrendous conditions inside the besieged territory and rising number of deaths of Palestinian civilians. Allied militant groups Hamas and Islamic Jihad said their fighters had detonated explosive devices against advancing troops, dropped grenades from drones, and fired mortars and anti-tank rockets in fierce urban warfare around destroyed buildings. Blinken, on his second trip to Israel in a month, is due to discuss with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu concrete steps to minimize harm to civilians in Gaza. Buildings have been flattened, and thousands of people have fled homes to escape relentless bombings. Gaza health authorities say at least 9,061 people, many of them women and children, have been killed since Israel started its assault on the enclave of 2.3 million people in retaliation for deadly attacks by Hamas militants on southern Israel. Israel says Hamas killed 1,400 people, mostly civilians, and took more than 240 hostages in the attacks on the deadliest day of its 75-year-old history. On Thursday, Netanyahu said the military had encircled Gaza City and was advancing. The Israeli military said on Friday its warplanes, artillery and navy had struck Hamas targets overnight, killing several militants including Mustafa Dalal, a Hamas commander it said had directed combat in Gaza. The United Arab Emirates, one of a handful of Arab states with diplomatic ties to Israel, said on Friday it was working, relentlessly, for an immediate ceasefire, warning that the risk of regional spillover and further escalation was real. Israel has dismissed these calls, saying it targets Hamas fighters whom it accuses of intentionally hiding among the population and civilian buildings. Hamas is a Palestinian military and political group, which has gained power in the Gaza Strip since winning legislative elections there in 2006. Its stated aim is to establish a Palestinian state, while refusing to recognize Israel's right to exist. Share this with family and friends. Recommended for you. Israel says tanks entering Gaza, as top international court warns over possible aid crimes. World. Paul Keating details why he refused to sign Hamas-Israel statement by former PMs. Australia. Relief and fear. Evacuated Australians speak after Gaza border crossing breakthrough. Australia. Gaza officials, Israeli strikes on refugee camp killed 195, as UN flags possible war crimes. Middle East. Don't wait, government urged to repatriate 31 Australians from Syria, despite court ruling. Australia. How livable is your community? It may depend on your age and gender. Australia. Israel pounds Gaza and declares second phase of war amid warnings of intolerable suffering. Middle East. War is raging in Gaza. Violence against Palestinians is also surging in the West Bank. Middle East. Topics. SBS World News. Explore SBS. SBS Home. SBS On Demand. News. Audio. Languages. What's on? TV and radio guide. Food. Indigenous. Sport. Voices. Teaching resources. Languages. Arabic. Pu Tong Hua, Mandarin. Guang Dong Hua, Cantonese. Tieng Viet, Vietnamese. Hangujao, Korean. See all languages. Contact SBS. 1-800-500-727, toll free. Help Centre. Locked Bag 028, Crow's Nest, New South Wales 1585. Follow SBS. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Copyright. Terms and conditions. Privacy. Your online preferences. Sales and advertising. Complaints. SBS Code of Practice. Careers. About Us. SBS acknowledges the traditional custodians of country and their connections and continuous care for the skies, lands and waterways throughout Australia.